Flash, look at you. Hey, man, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm in North Carolina hanging out
North
talking to you.
Carolina. Great to
Yeah.
see you again. You're looking great. I've had you on the air with me multiple times over the last 30 plus years, going way
Yeah.
back to KNAC, man. The
Yeah,
KNAC.
I know, right?
Yeah. Hell
I
yeah.
know it's a trip. It's nice to talk to somebody who's been in the trenches that long because there's not that many of us left.
Right. You're right. You're right. I mean, we were the first station just because we were geographically in the vicinity to play you guys on the air for the first time. So, I mean, that's a feather in our cap, Pretty
Yeah,
amazing.
well, I mean, all things considered, was actually one of the only stations like that in the country.
Right.
There wasn't too many of them.
Right. And you're one of the only bands like that left doing it at the level that you're doing. I know we're talking about your new solo single, your upcoming album, the tour, but I got to tell you, first off, and thanks for checking in with our Audacy check-in for our stations around the nation. I caught you guys twice in the span of the last month, first in Portland, recently in St. Paul, both from the pit. And Jesus, what a over the top spectacle, man. I mean, 5 years after the reunion, you're still doing it, and you're firing on all. You're a machine at this point. You know what I
Well,
mean?
we really just dig doing it, and being forced to be off the road for as long as we were, it really reminds you how much you really love doing it and how much you sort of thrive on it. And when you're in a situation where you're told you can't do it, it's
Right. That's got to drive you fucking bananas.
Yeah, it was tough, man. That
Yeah.
year of just like not knowing, it was definitely brutal. So I kept myself busy the whole time.
Is that when you did all the new stuff for
Yeah,
your
well,
solo?
was with the onset what was it, March, I guess, when this whole thing with COVID started. We had a tour that was going to be a global tour. Guns did, starting in March in South America, and it was going to go all the way through the US, Europe, Australia, Asia, and all that kind of stuff. And
Right.
so we did one show in Mexico and then came home, and that was
Oh
that.
yeah, I remember
So
reading about that. Yeah.
yeah. So first I sort of just acclimated to what was developing at the time, with the whole COVID thing, because there was a learning curve to that. And then after the first couple months of just sort of stewing and trying to figure out what to do and all that kind of shit, I started jamming, and I have a small little studio in LA, and I started putting together ideas for what would end up being the next Conspirators record, making demos of this stuff and sending them off to the guys and whatnot. And then after that was over, sat around twiddling my thumbs, and then got on the phone with Dave Cobb to produce the record, and decided to go out to Nashville and actually.
Dave Cobb did this. Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh
Wow.
yeah, Dave Cobb did
Yeah.
it. Great, man. He's awesome. I mean,
Yeah.
all the guys I've ever worked with. I mean, Elvis is amazing, and Eric Valentine is amazing.
Sure.
Dave, they're all very unique, and Dave is very unique into his own trip. And the thing that turned me on about Dave was, we had this phone call, sort of initial phone call, and we started talking about great rock and roll records, live records, studio records, but performed live, and Glenn John, shit like that.
Right.
And he said, man, we'll just do this. We'll just bang this thing out live. And I was like, that's what I want to do, with the guitars in the room, so we're really keeping.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And so that's what we did. And so we went to Nashville, we went to RCA, that historic studio, Chet Atkins' old place, Studio A in.
Is that where Chris Stapleton did his record?
Yeah,
Studio
yeah.
A and two? Yeah. Okay. Right.
And so it's this great room, and it facilitates, because of the size of it, being able to have the whole back line intact with just a couple gobos, and actually all play at the same time with vocals, and keep all of it. And so, I mean, all things considered, the record was basically done in 5 days. And then we did some,
Oh, wow.
But then
overdubs.
Well, we did a
After
couple of overdubs. There was some harmonies, background vocals, some percussion, and whatnot. But the funny thing about this recording was that when we finished all the basic tracks and all that stuff, I was started to do the overdubs, and I got a phone call from Myles, and I was like, why is Myles calling me? We're both in the same building.
Okay.
We've been testing on it every other day while we were there, and tested positive, right? So then subsequently Todd and Brent tested positive, so everybody had to go back to the Airbnb that we were renting,
Right.
and quarantine, right? So then it just leaves me, and Dave Cobb was cool. One of the
Okay.
engineers was also positive, so he had to go home. So there was basically three of us and Frank. We sent Frank home because he was done,
Right.
and he didn't have any overdubs to do, and so then it was like we only had like an afternoon's worth of overdubs, right? So now what? So we said, okay, well, we'll start mixing.
Back in the day, this could have gotten crazy. This could have gone off the rails, but yeah, now
it definitely could have. So we said, well, all the vocals are keepers, so we'll start mixing, right? And we'll mix what we can. And then the next, I think about a week later, I went and got a vax, right? I got vaccinated. And 2 days after that, I got tested and I was positive. So I was like,
jeez, dude.
So I quarantined. And so then what we did was we took the microphones and some recording gear and brought it to the house. And those guys did the background vocals in the guest house.
Oh, nice.
At COVID mansion, I called it. Anyway, so then those guys came out of it, and Brent went back in the studio and got the percussion done. And because I was already vaxxed, I was only in quarantine for 5 days. So I came out, and then we mixed the record, and that was it. But it was a real sort of bonding experience because we're all living in the same house, going through this thing and trying to make this record. Sure. And it just, we finished it, and then we got on the bus and drove back home.
What an experience, man. Well, I've heard the new song, The River is Rising. It's been on repeat this morning, man. I've heard it 7-8 times, and it is a ripper. It's badass, dude.
Yeah.
Is that indicative of the rest of the record? Or did Cobb bring something new to it?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's indicative of the rest of the record. Okay. I mean, it is its own unique thing. I think this is probably the most diverse record that we've done so far in terms of like styles, so it's obviously a rock and roll record and everything, but it really touches on a lot of different vibes and tempos and so on and so forth. So there you go.
Your first solo record, your self-titled Slash, came out over a decade ago with a who's who of different revolving door of singers. You had Chris Cornell, Lemmy, Ozzy, and Myles Kennedy, who I've been a fan of since even his performance in Rockstar was amazing, and but you had him on 2 songs, Back to Cali and was it Starlight?
Yeah.
And then you obviously saw something in him to go, this is the guy. I mean, his voice is so distinctive,
Yeah, the record was, the first solo record was finished, and I had those 2 songs left over, and I'd never been able to figure out who would sound good on those 2 songs. Mm-hmm. And rather than give up, I knew Myles Kennedy's name because we tried to get him into Velvet Revolver at one point, but I'd never heard him sing myself. Matt had heard him sing, and that's why he said, call this guy up and have him come down. He's great. And I said, okay, I'll take your word for it. And Myles never ended up showing up. So I thought, well, let me look into this guy. So I listened to some Alter Bridge stuff. And I was like, okay. And I called him up and I sent him the 2 songs. And then Starlight was the first one that he did. And I was working with Eric Valentine. I said, is it just me, or is this really fucking good? And he goes, no, this is great. Let's have him come in. So he came in, really, really cool, very unassuming guy, especially for a lead singer.
Yeah.
And, we hit it off really well. And so he did the studio version of Starlight. And I said, hey, would you be interested in doing one other one? And that was Back from Cali. And at that point, I was like, I got to support this record somehow. I'm not in any band. I got no ties to anything. So what should I do here? So then I asked Myles, thinking for sure that he's not going to be available. But I asked him because his voice is he's got so much range. So I thought, he could do any of these songs that traverse my whole career, kind of thing. So he said, yeah, I would love to do it. And then I met Brent, who I'd been hearing about, Brent Fitz, which was amazing because I've played with every drummer in town and never heard of this guy. And he played with all these people that I knew. Anyway, so he was great. And he turned me on to Todd, who was really sort of the band's secret weapon because he's an amazing singer. So the 2 sing really well off each other. And we've just been doing this ever since. We just have fun doing it. There's no pressure. We get together, we write music, we go and record it. It's always fun. And it's never it's not like we're some, like record company pressure, because I've always been the record company, and we just make music. Now, is Frank
Sidoris, who you mentioned earlier, is he playing on the album, or are you playing all the guitar parts? Because Frank's also in Wolfgang's band, who Frank rode with you.
Frank played on this record, like, you know, all of it, like I said, all of it's live. So he's
Oh, okay.
full on. He didn't play on World on Fire because we hired him right when the record was pretty much when we first started doing the record.
Right.
And I didn't know him that well, and I just did all the guitar parts. But he played on Living the Dream, and he played on this number 4.
Well, you've been a workhorse guitarist from the get-go, in addition to being a bona fide guitar hero since '87. But I mean, I love the fact that even when you weren't in Guns, you had Slash's Blues Ball going on. I caught you guys a couple different shows around LA, and then Slash's Snake Pit after that. I still listen to It's 5 O'Clock Somewhere like at least once every month and a half, 2 months. It's such an amazing record. So to see you continue to do this, it doesn't matter what's going on around you. You're going to be Slash and do what you want. I mean, these new songs, but when you're writing them, do you think about Guns, or do you think, oh, this is going to go for my solo band?
I mean, well, with Guns, it's different because Guns is one of those things that we all get together and more or less just focus on Guns in the moment.
Right.
Where I'm just, you know, cruising around on tour with the Conspirators, I'm really in conspirator world. So any new stuff that I come up with is dedicated to that, you know, because that's where my head's at. So I mean, you know, as far as with Guns is concerned, we haven't even gotten to that point of really in earnest sitting down and writing. We've been doing a lot of material that's been sort of sitting around for a while. So that will be a whole focused endeavor unto itself.
So the first 2 songs that we've got that you guys actually started playing the second one live the other night, Absurd and the other new one that's Hard School. That's going to be the name of the EP coming in February.
Right.
Those were kind of in infancy in the Chinese democracy days, right? And then
they both have a lot of history. Okay. What happened was Axl has all these songs that he recorded at some point along the way, and so Duff and I went and redid them basically.
Right. So your stamp is all over those.
Yeah, and you know, it's like I write my own kind of parts to whatever it is that's going on, and just sort of took the drums and redid everything else. So.
That's awesome. Well, speaking of February and Portland in February is where you're kicking off your upcoming solo tour.
Yeah.
And then you're ending, I think it's 28 dates you end in Orlando. And I saw there's a Grand Ole Opry date through there. Is that the Dave Cobb influence or what?
No, well, actually, I mean,
that's
Dave,
pretty awesome.
He did have a lot of influence when it came to like my getting into country music, you know, because I've always been a fan of like certain players that go way back. But being in Nashville, I started getting really into country music history. And I know a lot about the Grand Ole Opry now that I didn't know back then or before then. But we actually played there on the Living the Dream tour. That was where we
you did? Okay.
So that was a huge honor, but it'll be even more so now that I really understand the history of where the Grand Ole Opry comes from, you know? So, you know, how it is established in the radio show and all that kind of shit. So, it's to be accepted in that capacity is really cool, you know, for a rock band like us, because you have to have some handle on musicality to be able to play.
Yeah, exactly. I love how Dave has put his stamp on all of the new school outlaw country. I mean, that guy is the go-to dude for all of that whole scene, you know?
Yeah, I mean, like I didn't know that much about him prior to calling him up. I mean, he was actually recommended to me by Dave from Roadrunner, which, you know, I've sort of parted ways with Roadrunner, but it was like, you know, I'm looking for a cool producer to do this next record. And he gave me a list of names, and one of them was Dave Cobb. And I looked him up, and he's done some really, really cool shit. Like I listened to a lot of the stuff that he did. This is the kind of artist type producer I want to work with. And we just hit it off on the phone, and then in person. I mean, you know, like on the record, it's really, really raw. You know, it's just us. There's a lot of mistakes and shit on there, but we left it. And he let me do it. Normally, a producer will not let me do that.
Sure.
And I could be wrong, but I like it that way.
Well, it gives it the raw rock and roll attitude, you know?
Yeah. And he does that with all the guys that he wins Grammys with, you know, all these country guys, they're all just doing their thing, and it's not overproduced. It's not like thinking too hard, and you know, it's not, you know, in the headspace of let's win a Grammy. It's just making you know, and all its human imperfection. So,
and that's as it should be, should be. Right on. Well, I know you're busy, man. It's great to see you, Slash. The River is Rising. The new single is out. The upcoming album. When is that happening?
February, I think February 2nd, or
Oh,
maybe
right when the tour cranks up.
Yeah, I think they might have pushed it back a week, but it's definitely February.
Right on. Well, congrats on all your success, man. I mean,
Yeah,
it couldn't happen to a nicer guy and a more genuine dude. I love you. You're the
all
real
right.
deal.
No,
Yeah.
hopefully I'll see you around, but it's definitely good to talk to you, man. Take
Right
care.
on. You too. All right, Slash. Cheers.
Cheers.